I had to learn to talk about the little things when they're little. Don't hold it in, because when we hold it in and we don't talk and we're trying to keep the peace.
Welcome to Finding Your Spark again. I am so pleased to have with me here today Ann Visser, who is a life coach specializing in communication and relationships. I know it will be of great value to all of you. Welcome, Ann.
Thank you so much, Donna Lynn, for having me on the Finding Your Spark Again podcast. I'm really happy to meet you. I've been following along, so I'm excited to be here today and add value to your people and your audience.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that's great. I when I saw your website, I thought, well, isn't this just the place where people get off course so easily in terms of trying to find joy is in relationships, right? So I let's start with that.
Absolutely. And I think we get off course because we think it should be easy. Love should just come naturally. Communication. I mean, we've been communicating since we were about 2. So shouldn't we be experts at it by now? And we're not taught these transferable skills that are so essential for everything in our life, whatever it is we do. They're not soft skills, they're transferable skills. As I recently heard somebody say, we need them at home, we need them with our family, extended family, we need them at work. So wherever we go, we need to be able to communicate effectively in the way that we lead and influence people, everything that we do. And so it is easy to get off course because to some degree we think we should be good at it when we're really not very good at it at all.
Yeah, so in my experience, the precursor to good communication is awareness of self. So let's talk a little bit about that and how does that play into what we're doing and where do we start?
You are talking my language, Donna Lynn. Awareness of self. And so can I tell you a little bit of our story and then come into that? Because this is exactly why we ran into trouble in our own marriage and why I do what I do.
Yes,
yeah.
I can't wait to hear it.
So I shamelessly chased this young man. I was only 15, Donna Lynn, much too young to be chasing somebody, but I was. And I just wanted
I want to just, before you even go anywhere with that, I totally chased my husband. Totally. I was like, that's the one. I found him. Now all I have to do is hunt him.
Yeah,
Didn't work out the first time either.
Oh, it
we
didn't.
had to do it twice. Nope, we had to do it twice.
Oh,
anyway.
Fun.
Yeah.
Well, I really wanted a date. This young man was different. I was fascinated. I was curious. I wanted to learn everything about him. So long before we started dating, I was asking him questions and learning more about who he was, what was important to him, what was driving him. He was a leader in our school. I was so curious. And so about 4 or 5 months later, I did get a date. It took me some time. And then 3 years later, we married. And the photographer said to us on our wedding day, I've never seen a couple look at each other the way the two of you look at each other. We had that spark that you're talking about, Donna Lynn. Yeah. And then 1 month after we were married, I was very sick on the couch. I was expecting our first, and really sick 4 months and couldn't eat anything. So this is not a good way to start marriage. And then we had 5 kids in 6 years. And my husband was new to farm life. And so you combine this busy farm life with this busy family life, and those are external pressures. And then we had these internal pressures that we didn't know how to communicate what was happening to us. We didn't know how to conflict well. We hadn't created any healthy systems, is kind of what we do, right? It's not very romantic, but that's what we do in relationship. We create these systems for how we communicate, how we fight, how we spend our money, if we're people of faith, and how we express that. But we didn't have any of the skills that we needed to be able to talk about what was happening. And so it created this emotional distance in our marriage. And I have a friend that calls it creeping separateness. And I thought, yeah, that's what it felt like. It just kind of creeped up on us because we had this amazing love story And then it all came crashing down so badly that on a particular night, it was a date night, and we sat in our farm truck. My husband's a farmer, and we were outside our favorite restaurant, and I was at the end of my rope, and I said to him, I can't do this anymore. And he looked at me and he said, what do you mean you can't do this anymore? And I said, I can't do marriage like this anymore. And as I poured out my unhappiness, he heard me. And for the first time in a long time, he shared how unhappy he was. And I missed that. I missed his pain. I think because I was in so much pain myself, and because I was caring for all these needs with these little ones. And that night we said, we're going to get the help that we need in order to get better. And that started me on a journey of self-discovery, and him as well, and then us together. Because there's three parts to that, right? There's his journey, there's my journey, but then there's our journey together. And so that self-awareness was just so key for me. I didn't know myself well enough to tell him what I was feeling, what I was thinking, what I wanted. I was a slow processor. I'm a people pleaser. I'm a conflict avoider. I'm a peace lover. I just was avoiding all of that. And so that's a skill, to be able to identify, this is how I feel. This is what I want. I didn't know how to do that. So in part of my recovery was learning who am I, and to be able then to learn how to express that to him without destroying him, because we can do that in a way that destroys the other person too, right? And so then that's the next part of it. How do I express, that I'm not happy here in this place, or that you're not meeting my needs, without completely destroying you, and to be able to get a better result? And so this put us on a huge journey of self-discovery and of couple discovery as well, to learn how to communicate better and more effectively.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that. There are several points in there that I'd really like to kind of dive into with you. One is this concept of fight rules, right? This was something I had to learn in my marriage, right? That there were certain things that were triggers that would create a really an atmosphere where you can't win. Nobody can win in this conversation, because you've amped it up so much through language that there's no pathway. And really, we had to learn that. We learned that through therapy, right? So we had to learn that by finding out, like, oh, there is this basis of love, and there is this basis where we want to communicate with each other. But when we're in the throes of anger, when the energy and the adrenaline is coursing through your body, that you still have to be riding that horse, right? That still has to be you in charge of that you that is there, who wants to scream at everybody. And that's a really that's a skill you have to practice for many people.
Absolutely. Being able to manage our own emotions in the midst of feeling triggered, or being able then to say, okay, I need a break. I call it a timeout. I need a timeout. Give myself a timeout because I know that I need some space here, either to think about what's happening, or to think about my internal world, to be able to understand that better, because I've been triggered here. So that was important for me to be able to do, is just to say in the midst of that, I need a break. But then to be able to, then I learned that I couldn't just walk away. That wasn't working. That upset him, because he didn't know, okay, well, is this finished? Are we going to come back to this? What's going to happen next?
Oh, I can remember one time I thought he was leaving me when he did that.
Yeah, right.
He's a slow processor, and I never was. I was always like this, right? I was like, oh my God, he's leaving me. He's like, I'm not leaving.
Oh, Donalyn, I just admire fast processors, because I am one of those slow processors. So I'm the one that needs to say, oh, timeout. I need a timeout. And then, but then I had to say, okay, can we come back to this in 30 minutes? Because we know that when the body gets upset like that, it takes about 30 minutes to kind of settle down. That physiologically, like our blood pressure rises, our heartbeat rises, and that makes us really tired. And so we need the body to settle down, and then we need the mind to kick into gear, like that thinking brain that needs to kick into gear so we can be a little more logical instead of just the emotional brain. And then, but make a date to come back so that my husband would know that, yeah, I'm not walking out the door here. I'm just needing a timeout. So that was a big lesson for me to learn. Another big lesson to learn for me was timing. He'd be walking out the door and I'd be, but, what about this? And he's trying to get to work, or he's trying to get out the door to an appointment or something like that. And I had to learn that timing was important. And then late at night, that's not a good time to talk about these things. I remember we would go around and around and around and not get anywhere because it was late at night. We were both tired. Neither of us are in our right mind when it's late at night. And so it needed to take a time out to break and then come back to it again the next day. So, yeah, it's so important to be aware of what's happening inside, and then being able to give yourself a timeout when you're being triggered. But then also to know the other person. We all know those hot button issues that we can press, and we can just get it like that. And it can be so satisfying sometimes. In the worst way.
It can, and for some people, I think some people are yellers like me. I'm a yeller, so it would be, you would get that reaction. But my husband was someone who internalized, and so you would just lose him for a few days if you decided that you wanted to push that button. So there was really no desire to push in that direction for me, because you made life so much harder when you went in that direction.
Thank you for saying that. You make life so much harder because we can do that to ourselves. It doesn't necessarily have to be hard, but we can do that to ourselves when we push those hot buttons of our partner needlessly. Now, sometimes we have to enter into a conversation that we know is not going to be, we know it's going to be hard, but we know that it needs to be had. And I had to learn that I had to start that with care and compassion. And I remember a time when we were dealing with something that was coming up again and again. I didn't understand it. I didn't know what it was, but I knew that I was triggering it, though I didn't know how. And because I knew it wasn't about me, I was like, you talk to the hand. This is not about me. You figure this out. And I never said that to him, but that was my attitude. And he picked that up, Donnelly. We communicate without words. And I was communicating to him, like, this is your problem. You deal with it. And it wasn't until I decided, I remember the day I was standing in our bedroom and I thought, I am not going to fight about this anymore. And that decision put me into a place of curiosity. I had to make that decision every time he was triggered again to say to myself, I'm not going to fight about this. Breathe, breathe.
This is where your tools come in.
Yeah, exactly. Because when they're being triggered, it's easy for us to jump into defense mode. It's not my fault. It's not my problem. But I remember that care and compassion, it didn't work right away, by the way, because I had had a track record of not caring, or it appeared that I didn't care because of my attitude. And I had to build trust in him. I had to rebuild that trust in him that I do care. And so once he started to get the picture that, oh, she does care, he started to open up about what was really going on inside of him. It took a very long time to figure that out. And in the end, it turned out that it was emotional abandonment that he was feeling. And I never, ever would have gotten there from where we started, those surface issues that we were fighting about. I never, ever would have gotten to the bottom of that, neither would he, if I hadn't have started to care about what was happening in him and then begin to listen and ask questions in a caring way to help him get to the bottom. I really think that in marriage, there's a lot of opportunity to heal from our past when we can approach it that way. It was hard, but it was incredible. It's taken us to where we are today. It was like walking through a desert and a wilderness, but we were able to get to a place where we are today, 42 years later, more passionately in love than we were back then when we first met.
So you kind of come back to this sense of awareness, and my experience with people in terms of trying to raise their awareness and using communication at the same time is that often they feel like they do know the problem. They know what their internal problem is. They're like, I am aware, and this is the problem. And they do one of two things. They either freeze and they go like, okay, we're just gonna see if this will go away. Or they, for lack of a better way of saying it, just kind of puke everywhere. You know what I mean? They just are always on about the thing, pointing at the problem. And they're certain that they're aware that what's happening in them is that I have a need that's not being met in this way, blah, 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 right? This specific thing. But I think there is a different kind of awareness that you're talking about here. And that's an awareness that is beyond the awareness of the moment and even beyond the awareness of the relationship. So that when we're raising awareness, we're really raising it to our body, mind, and spirit. So it's a big thing. It's a really big thing. And words, I find, don't really do it justice, right? People are like, yeah, I got you. Body, mind, and spirit. We got this. You know, it's just, let's slow down. What exactly is the spirit? You know, I mean, if you really slow it down and have a different sense of awareness is what I hear in your story that you were willing to do over a period of time. Can you just talk a little bit more about that?
The first thing that comes to my mind when you ask that question is, I remember the day that I learned that when someone is triggered, it's an opportunity. I'm going to put that in air quotes for anybody that's listening to the podcast. Opportunity.
We're going to put it on Twitter. As they say, that's a tweetable.
When I'm triggered, it's an opportunity for me to go within and to find out, to discover what something deeper is happening. What was that overreaction about? What was really going on here? So that someone else being triggered was an opportunity for me to be curious and to get curious. And it's the hardest thing in the world because we want to fight back. And I like to call that right fighters. You mentioned that earlier, Donalyn. And that's what I was, and that's what I was doing, and that wasn't working for us, by the way.
No,
and I say that
being right, nobody cares about being right because we all want it.
Yeah. And so I had to move back from being that right fighter because I was right. It wasn't about me, but I was wrong in the way that I was approaching him, in the sense that I wasn't caring. And so, understanding that triggering, that was an opportunity for me to get to know him better. And so I say that conflict is the doorway to intimacy, as into me you see. So that's an opportunity for me to see into him, for him to see into me, and for me to see into me. And so when that triggering was happening, it's only by staying in a state of curiosity, as hard as it is not to fight back and not to be right. And that's what I say to my people, number one, in pivotal conversations, check emotions. So stay in a state of curiosity. That's number two, like when you're communicating and clarifying where you are, stay in that state of, help me understand. I love that phrase, help me understand. Because as soon as I said that, I'm sure you can kind of feel that in your body. It's like, oh, okay, she's on my side. Or this one really helps me. I don't say it out loud, but I try to move into that track of, I wonder. So I wonder why he's overreacting here. I wonder what he's feeling. I wonder what she's experiencing right now. I wonder what's in the past that is challenging us right here in this conversation. So I think staying in that state of curiosity and staying in that state of wonder. And when I feel myself slipping out of that, I try to pull myself back. But the only way I can do that is if I have checked my emotions in the beginning. And I say that pivotal conversations, they often come up over and over and over again. So frequently there is opportunity to sit and have a little bit of space to reflect. And I like to journal. That really helps my slow processor get into gear. I like to journal. What am I thinking? What am I feeling? What is troubling me here? Because it's not always this surface issue. Sometimes it's much deeper. And when I can get to that, what is troubling me here? And then I'm better equipped to actually say what needs to be said in a pivotal conversation and to communicate that clearly. And even I find when I know what's going on inside of me, I'm better able to manage my emotions in the middle of a conversation because I already know what's going on and what's happening for me. So I can better able listen to the other person. And by the way, one of my favorite quotes is by David Osberger. He says, being heard is so close to being loved that for the average person, they're almost indistinguishable. Isn't that powerful?
Yeah, it's very powerful.
Yeah, powerful.
It really is.
And
yeah.
I think listening is so underrated, and just we are so volatile today, and we're not listening to each other. And we need each other to solve the problems that leaders need to solve in today's world. We need each other to work together to solve these problems. So we need to listen. And it's amazing what the farmer can bring to the table and what he knows today about, like, he knows about world markets. He knows about technology. His tractor, I could drive his tractor. That's what I say to him, Donalyn, because it's all computerized. He knows so much about the world around him that he can add to the conversation, whatever it is you're talking about. And that's the same for everyone. In their genres and what they know, there's so much that we know and that we need to listen to one another to solve the problems in today's world.
Yeah. 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 You're reminding me of a time when my late husband and I discovered that we were each running our own movie, and we were movie watchers. So this was a metaphor that we could really grab onto, and that, like, I'm in my movie and you're in your movie, and then you come along and you want to have some deep, meaningful conversation. I'm running my movie over here. So that sort of sense of, like, how do I ask for the person to show up in this way where they're not running their movie and I'm not running my movie, and we're sort of finding a new thing together, even in this 10 minutes, right? Like, it's not like this is our life choice. It's that, we already made that when we got married, or when we, remained close as siblings, or whatever relationship you're working in, right? So that's another piece of that awareness puzzle, to be able to just say, I want you to show up in this way for me where you can listen. Let's find a time to do that, as opposed to, but I need to know now. But like you said, we're going to bed. Come on, it's time to talk about our relationship. Yeah. So I love that you bring up this word pivotal. In my work, we talk a lot about pivoting, right? So, because my work really is between you and you, right? It's between you as how you feel like as a person and your larger context within yourself, right? So that sense of soul or spirit, right? And that's the relationship. When we work on that relationship, we can really easily access happiness and joy, because it's not dependent on the world. You don't need your husband to be listeing for that one. He can if he wants to. He'll catch on after a while. So that idea of taking time with yourself is when we talk about it in my practice. You're taking time with yourself to say, this is where I am. I'm angry. I'm irritated. I'm frustrated. I'm tired of doing the same thing over and over again. Whatever that thing is that is not going well for you. And how am I going to work with myself to pivot that into a place where I can have some positive expectation, right? Because you can't reach for joy when you're in any of those states, right? Because it's like joy is not happening. You're too far away. I like to visualize it as a roadmap, right? It's like you got to get in the car and drive for a while before you can get there.
Yes.
And so what's interesting about your use of that word and my experience with that word is that it feels like you're talking about the conversations in which our relationship could pivot to a different point.
Yes, exactly. And we have these conversations every single day because I like to, first of all, I love that you're talking about the internal world because I think we try to change our partner, our location, our job, all that external stuff, and that doesn't bring joy.
Yeah, quite often when I ask people, how do you find joy? They say, "Oh, I go for a run, or I do a thing, I eat a thing, I participate in the world, and I meditate." Right, like we can make it pretty etheric, and it's still a thing we're doing.
And that joy needs to come from inside. So I love that you're talking about that. And so how I like to think about pivotal conversations is our conversation in the truck was a big pivotal conversation on our date night because something wasn't working. So I like to think about pivotal conversations. The goal is to create some shift or change because in some way something is not working. So they're going to require some degree of either honesty or vulnerability, which I kind of differentiate between the two of those. So if we're at work, it's going to require some honesty, but maybe not a whole lot of vulnerability because it's going to be different for different people. Whereas if it's with our intimate partner, it's going to require some more vulnerability. And so what I really love about pivotal conversations are it brings clarity either to me as a person, to both of us, or to the relationship or the situation. So it could even be like a conversation that you have with a colleague at work because they hang around your desk a whole lot and you're not able to get your work done and you end up staying late for work and you know there are people at home waiting for you. And so that's a pivotal conversation because there's a shift that's needed in your workplace in the way that they're hanging out at your desk. And so another pivotal conversation might be that you have at home because someone has lost a job. That would be a bigger pivotal conversation because you have to adjust the budget because you don't have the same income coming in. That would be a larger pivotal conversation. But I'm noticing that we have these conversations every single day in some way. My husband came home half an hour ago and said, "Coffee?" I said, "I have 15 minutes and then I'm going to meet Donna Lynn." There's just a little bit of a pivotal conversation, right? He has an expectation. And it's like, well, this is what I can do.
And such clear communication about it. He asked if you were willing to stop running your movie for a minute and had the mental capacity and emotional capacity to show up in his movie for a minute, right? And you had a choice that you could make at that moment. And you made it clear that it was not based on whether you loved him or not.
That's
Right?
right.
It wasn't like, I don't have time for you.
That's right. And even I said to him, "Donald, only because I'm ready." I was ready. I did my homework. I listened to your podcast. I had your emails. I was ready to go. So to make that clear too for next time, right? When I'm hopping on a podcast, if I'm not ready, it may take me longer.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Clear. So, but a little pivotal conversation, but so important. And so I love to think about these because my people are extraordinarily kind and very agreeable. And so they want to keep the peace. And so they hesitate to be clear in their communication and to enter into even a small pivotal conversation because I might be disappointing him or I might be disappointing myself. And so I like to make it really clear that pivotal conversations, again, are an opportunity to be able to connect because I really believe that relationships are all about our ability to be able to connect with each other. And we drew that through effective communication.
I think there is a definite correlation between not having those small conversations, not being willing to raise our own awareness and then raise that awareness within the context of our relationships, that really leads to severing relationships, right? You feel like I have no choice. I've been showing up. I've been trying to make this thing work for X amount of time. I'm tired of trying to make it work. We're done. And the other person is like, what do you mean you've been trying? I didn't even know there was an issue. you know?
Yes, exactly. And I like to say to my people, keep short accounts. And we had to learn that lesson. It was a hard lesson to learn because I'm a recovering people pleaser. I had to learn to talk about the little things when they're little. Don't hold it in, because when we hold it in and we don't talk and we're trying to keep the peace because we don't want to hurt somebody, I hear my people say that, I don't want to hurt them. We hurt them more by not having those little conversations, because we build resentment inside, and then we become this volcanic explosion that happens. And you're right, they're wondering like, what just happened? I didn't even know we had a problem.
Yeah.
What's going on here? In
Yeah.
fact, Michelle Werner Davis calls women the walkaway wife syndrome. She identified that women will stay, they'll leave emotionally long before they actually leave physically, and they'll set things up so that they're ready to leave, because we don't talk about these little things that can then build up, and instead of dealing with them when they're smaller. So keep short accounts so that they don't become bigger issues, so that you're walking out the door, deal with them when they're smaller.
Yeah. These are such great foundational concepts that you're talking about. So, when we're talking about creating happiness within relationships of any kind, it really takes that foundational work. I think a lot of times people think they can kind of swoop into their coworker relationships or their home relationships or whatever it is and go like, now I'm happy. Let's do it. right. And there's this sense that there's, first of all, there's some sweeping to do, right? When you've been in the relationship for a while. But even if there wasn't that inner work that we do on ourselves is what really allows us to have to set the bricks down for the foundation of those relationships. And then from there, we can really springboard up, right? We can bring that joy within ourselves. We can bring that happiness into our relationships, and we bring it, right? We don't have to rely on other people for this. In fact, we can't rely on other people. They are unreliable.
Well, and it's our own life, it's our own
That's
inner
right.
work, and so
That's
they
right.
don't even know what's going on. So they can't even. It's not their job. It's not their work to do. It's
That's right.
my work to do my inner work.
And they're unreliable because, sorry to interrupt, but I think to clarify kind of what I meant by that is important. I feel like they're unreliable because how they're going to take us, how they're going to respond to us, how they're going to be in relationship with us is dependent on how we show up. Right. So if we're showing up in this way that has expectation of stress and strife or irritation and frustration, then they are actually reliable. They're just not reliable to put you in a good mood. They're reliable to meet you where you are for the most part. Even when that where you are is really buried and you're unaware of it.
So true, Donald. If I'm sowing anger, I'm going to reap that, right? If I'm sowing defensiveness, I'm going to reap that. I'm experienced in all of these things. I'm only speaking from experience.
This is an important thing, actually, that you're bringing up, even though we're giggling. Um, and the importance of it is you practiced, right? We all practice. We have all practiced anger. We've all practiced irritation. We've all practiced annoyance, right, in our relationships. But that means
Impatience.
that in order, yeah, there you go. There you go. Another one. People like to practice that. But that practice piece of it means we have to understand that if we want to reach for peace, love, kindness, juiciness, real fun in a relationship, a place that is joyous, then we're going to have to practice. And the other person's going to have to practice, and we're going to have to practice together, and then we get somewhere.
Yes, I love that, Donald, and I think that's so true. And and that comes back to the awareness again. Like if I don't know what's going on inside of me, and then I react instead of respond and start from a good place of that joy and that peace and that calm, then I can bring that peace and calm to the table when I'm practicing that, and then I can even be more aware of when I've kind of slipped out of that. I slipped out of that earlier this week, Donna Lynn, and I had to do some work. I call it my thinking chair. I had to go to my thinking chair and process through what is going on here. It was a bigger thing, right? And when it's bigger, it can kind of catch us unaware, or it can kind of some of the tools that you have in your toolbox, you have to kind of pull out all the tools in the toolbox. And I had to do that this week because what I was bringing to the table was all of this upset that I was feeling inside of me. And so it's so important to have multiple tools too, to be able to understand what we're bringing, because sometimes we need all the tools.
I think you bring up a very important point with this in that you've been practicing a long time. And I think sometimes when people hear, oh, I could have a happy relationship, oh, I could have a joyous day, they think that that means that there's no upset in life. Like, yes, you're never going to be upset again. Not really, right? Because our lives are full. Our lives are full.
I remember a conversation that I had with my daughter once. We were sitting at the kitchen table, and I hadn't done my prep work. And I knew I needed to have a conversation with somebody about boundaries. And I said to my daughter, I just don't trust them. I didn't say it like that. I said, I just don't trust them. And my daughter looked at me. She was an adult, and she looked at me and she said, Mom, that's awful. You need to check that. Don't you love it when these older people, older young people speak into your life? And I knew as soon as it was out of my mouth, I knew I had a problem, right? Like the words, the way they were spoken. I just knew. And so I went back to my thinking chair to journal through, okay, you got a problem here. What's going on? What are you thinking? What are you feeling? And I recognized I was stuck back in 2005 when I had a challenge with this person, but they weren't there anymore. They had moved on, they had grown, and my emotions were still stuck back in history. And I know that if I had have had that conversation before I had done my thinking work and journaling, that I would have sabotaged that pivotal conversation. It was about setting boundaries with them. That conversation was so easy after checking my emotions, knowing where I was, then going in. It was short, it was easy, it was simple, but I knew I needed to do the work before I sat down. I was so grateful to my daughter that she kind of did a check. Like, she did the heart check, Mom. do that thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, you're not living how you talk. What's going on here?
No, absolutely. Another opportunity, right? When somebody kind of helps you with that heart check. Get that done.
I love that. I love that. Well, I feel like we could talk all day, and I would love to actually do that. But for the podcast, we keep it short. So can you tell us a little bit about what you've got going on? I know that you've got some things that you offer to people, and I'd like to hear about that.
Sure. And so I have a membership for Christian women called the Sisterhood Journey. I have a workshop. It's a 5-week workshop that I have ongoing. It's a virtual. It's called How to Avoid Falling for a Jerk. It's been written by Dr. John Van Epp. It's a fantastic program. It's for singles and singles again. And it's so incredibly helpful to help us identify, difficult people and differentiate between difficult and toxic. But then it also talks about, well, what is healthy relationship? And so it's based on attachment theory. It's a beautiful program. And I have I do one-on-one coaching as well. But I have a newsletter that I send out weekly, and it's called the Tuesday Brew with Ann, because I love my coffee, and that's a great way to stay. That's a great way to stay in touch with us. And we talk every week. We give communication tips on how to communicate in a way that aligns with your values. And I also have a free gift for your people. Can I offer that as
Lovely.
well,
Yes.
Dolly?
Yeah.
Okay.
Lovely.
It's called the 7-Day Challenge, and it will help you get ready for your next pivotal conversation. So every day we send out a short video with a simple action step to help you prepare for your next pivotal conversation. And you can pick that up at forbetterforever.com/challenge. And that's the numerical number for better, numerical number forever.com
That's great. We're going to link it for them too.
Perfect.
On all the
Great.
platforms, we make sure the link is there for them. So thank you so much. That is very kind. And I'm glad you've got so much going on. I want to remind our listeners that you can always find out what's going on for me, because we record in advance, at donnalyn.blog. Right now, we do have a joy quiz for you. So this is, where are you on the roadmap to joy? It's fantastic, and it's only a 10-question quiz. So please take a minute. It's super fun, because I believe in that, because I like to have fun. And take a minute and do that, and really get yourself on the journey to joy. And I look forward to seeing you all next time.